So, wait, should Rick Reuschel be in the Hall of Fame?
Rick Reuschel?
No, what are we saying? Welcome everyone back to the Vintage Card Voyage. I'm Mark.
I'm Ken.
And nice to see you all again. This episode's discussion, we thought we would talk about baseball, specifically about baseball statistics, something near and dear to my heart, because I was that kid in fourth or fifth grade who had Bill James abstract at home. Anyhow, this is specific to everyone's favorite newish statistic, which is WAR, which is something that people kind of use to define someone's career and how good it is, how whatever. And so I was thinking about the Hall of Fame specifically. There's an announcement coming up in December for the classic baseball era. And so that's the everyone pre-1980. Their career, basically their greatest contribution was realized prior to 1980. And then in 2025 in December, they're going to be voting for the contemporary baseball era player ballot, and that's going to be for those whose career was most apparent in 1980, after 1980, basically. And so that got me thinking about war and whose war, career war, basically, is to the level where maybe they should be considered for a Hall of Fame or not. And so what I did was I looked at both Baseball Reference and Fangraphs and basically picked the top 5 non-Hall of Fame people who are not in the dead ball era. So basically those who are post-war and then pre-1980s, and also kind of excluding the people who are, the McGuires and the Bonds and the Sosas and whomever and Clemens, the people who a lot of people do think should be in but are not because of performance-enhancing drugs. And so I have a list of 6 total people because, as it happens, 4 of the people are across both of the lists, And so the first person that comes on the list is not going to be a surprise to anyone, I don't think, and that is Mr. Pete Rose, who obviously has his own controversies as far as whether or not he should be Hall of Fame worthy. And so I should say he has a 79.5 WAR as far as Baseball Reference has to say, and 80.2 for Fangraphs. So obviously right around the 80 mark. Personally, I think he should be in, just because of his incredible statistic. He had no performance enhancing at all that we're aware of, at least. He admittedly did do something wrong and was punished for it.
Yeah.
And so, but I've always been, I'm just a fan of someone who can do something so incredible and so consistently over so many years and play baseball the right way. But obviously at the end of his career, he didn't play baseball the right way.
And I think for me, it's a yes. Just because how can you have the all-time leading hits leader not in the Hall of Fame?
Right.
It's like, if you thought about that year that he was chasing that record, that was the main story in baseball.
Yep.
The entire year, even before that, the year before, I remember, I think he got to 4,000.
Right.
And so, for me, it's a clear yes. It's like there's no question he should be in. Mm-hmm. Of course, he is not a great person because he gambled on baseball.
Yes.
But that aside, there's a lot of not great people in the Hall of Fame.
Right.
And I would say that if the Hall of Fame could do this, I would love them to build a separate section. And they could put Pete Rose, Barry Bonds,
right.
Roger Clemens, all the people that we know from a performance standpoint deserve to be in there. But just put them in a separate section in the Hall of Fame.
Right.
And then people who don't think they belong, they don't need to go to that section of the Hall of Fame.
Exactly.
Yeah. But I think he's definitely a yes.
Yeah, agreed. And then, so Yeah, we'll see. You know, obviously, I don't know if it'll ever happen, but maybe after he has left this earth, that might happen. But who knows?
Yeah.
So next on the list, at least for baseball reference, is a person who I am clearly biased about, and I will admit that fully. He had a 75.1 WAR in Baseball Reference, and he has a 68.1 WAR on Fangraphs, and that is Mr. Lou Whitaker, who was a mainstay for the Tigers for 19 years across the diamond from Alan Trammell, or across the bag, I should say, from Alan Trammell for all those 19 years. In fact, I again will admit my bias, and I do think he should be in the Hall of Fame. He won the Rookie of the Year award. He actually beat out Molitor that year and Trammell, as it happened. Trammell was much further down. He has 244 home runs, 2,369 hits, both of which are top 10 for second baseman. Consistent guy, more than 1,000 runs, more than 1,000 RBIs, just kind of consistent all the way through, and also won a few Gold Gloves, I believe, 3 Gold Gloves, 5 All-Star, and 4 Silver Slugger. So I just personally think he should. I mean, I understand why he hasn't yet. And maybe I'm just kind of rose-colored glasses because of the fact that Trammell got in and Morris got in, and it's like, why isn't Whitaker? He's clearly one of the best that was on the team, and so I don't know what your thoughts on that.
Yeah, Lou Whitaker for me is right on the line.
Yeah,
I think because he was a Rookie of the Year, he won a World Series, multiple Gold Gloves, multiple All-Stars, and I'll show you just a few cards here. There's the Burger King edition. So I guess considered a rookie card.
Yeah, definitely.
Yep. And then one of the things I did to thinking through whether people should be in the Hall was just go through the top sets and pick out, how often they had All-Star next to their name.
Right.
And there's one. That's the only one I could find for Lou. He's just an example of a steady player who was maybe not spectacular. And if you look at his second base peers, he's got higher WAR than Sandberg, Ryan Sandberg. Sandberg 68.
Interesting.
Alomar 67. Biggio 65.5. So those are 3 comps where I think most people would just say, oh, those guys are automatically in the Hall.
Right.
And so the fact that Whitaker is not, and then if you go further in history, there's people like Bobby Doerr, 51, Nellie Fox, 49. So there's definitely a precedence to it. The other thing I looked at is what is the highest MVP voting the player was in.
Right.
And the highest he did was in 1983. He was number 8.
Yeah.
So again, not a spectacular career. So I can see why the Hall of Fame is not putting him in. The other thing that hurts Lou is that he didn't do a lot of media.
Yeah.
He wasn't. He wasn't.
He wasn't out there. Right.
Yeah. The way that Trammell was really engaging and was in interviews a lot.
Right.
He was not. So, but to me, he's like right on the fence. And then we're going to talk about somebody else, and I'll talk more about why that has an effect on Lou Whitaker.
Sure. So we just discussed Lou Whitaker, and so Ken mentioned someone who's similar to Whitaker comes up next, and in fact does. He had a 71.1 WAR on Baseball Reference and a 69.2, so right around 70, and that is Bobby Grich, or Bob Grich, as this card says. Let me see there. Yep, and so his statistics. 1,833 hits during a 17-year career, 13 of which were full seasons, I should say. 266 batting average, which is, okay. Whitaker had a 276. He had a 794 OPS, which is 5 points higher than Whitaker. 224 home runs, 20 less than Whitaker, mostly as a second baseman. More than 1,000 runs, but not 1,000 RBIs. And again, a few Gold Gloves, an All-Star appearances, which Ken will talk a little more about. Anyways, but he to me never jumped out, and I have this bias toward having heard of the player while I was, a fan of baseball or listening or watching baseball or listening to baseball, reading about baseball. And maybe because he was in the 70s, most of his career, like his big numbers were in the 70s, he never really popped out for me as someone who was, notable, I guess. And so I feel like that's part of the thing is it's a Hall of Fame, right? You have to be in, there's a notability aspect to it. And so he, for me, just doesn't cut it necessarily.
Yeah. And for me, the thing that comes to mind with Bobby Grich after looking at it is that his career is very similar to Whitaker. They both have one World Series. His was in 1970 for the Orioles. I guess he wasn't a starter.
I don't think he played that much or at all. Yeah, I'm not sure.
He had 6 All-Star appearances. Whitaker had 5. He had 4 Gold Gloves. Whitaker had 3. His highest MVP voting season was 1979. He was 8th, just like Whitaker was 8th in
83, I think, yeah.
And then, I went through my Topps collection looking for All-Star cards, and he's got a couple of them, both with the Angels. And then he actually led the league in homers one year. But
so did 4 other
people did. Yeah, 3 other people did.
Yeah.
Armis and Eddie Murray and Dwight Evans. So, I know for me as a kid, I remember him being a home run leader, but that was also, I think, the strike year, right?
Yeah, it was.
So 22 is not a high number for.
No.
So Bobby Grich, to me, it's like I think they're linked. It's like if you put Whitaker in, I would think it would be hard not to put Grich in.
Right.
So they're about the same to me. They're both on the fence. But if you do it based on notoriety, I don't think Bobby Grich was ever playing in the league where if you said, who are the top 10 stars in the league?
Right.
He wouldn't be on there. He was he's at what my son calls Hall of Very Good.
Right.
He's not at the level. So
he was like pretty consistent over his career, but that's kind of it. And so, it's whether you reward consistency or not, I suppose. Yeah. Okay. And so now number 4 is a fascinating entry in this, I thought. His WAR on Baseball Reference is 69.5 and on Fangraph is 68.2. And that is none other than Rick Reuschel?
Rick Reuschel.
Really? Yes. Rick Reuschel. I don't understand it myself, honestly. I really don't. I actually, so having, again, grown up in Hawaii, I saw him in Hawaii because I believe when he was with the Pirates, he was sent down at some point during a season in the mid-'80s, and so he pitched with them for a little bit, I think.
I think that's correct.
Yeah.
He was on the Pirates for a while.
Yeah, and I believe he was with the Islanders for a little bit. So that, to me, it rings a bell. I was looking to see if I could find any autographs of him that I had, but I couldn't locate them, but I might have them. Anyways. So I was looking over his career, and he does have 214 wins, which is, nothing to sneeze at.
By today's standards, would be
exactly Hall of Fame worthy almost.
Yes.
He had a 3.37 career ERA, again, pretty good. 1.275 WHIP. Now we're getting into the I don't know categories. He had 120-win season, I believe in the 70s, with the Cubs, I think. He had 3 All-Star appearances and 3 years where he actually got some Cy Young voting, seasons. And 2 of the times, actually, he was number 3, which was kind of amazing to me. I hadn't realized that he was
And it was 77 and 87, which is a decade between, which is pretty incredible.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I think the 87 one was with the Giants. He had 19 wins or something like that. But I don't again, this is something where it's you think of, if you ask any fan of the 80s or 70s and ask them, do you think Rick Reuschel belongs in the Hall of Fame? I wouldn't imagine anyone would say, oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. It'd be let me look at his stats and then get back to you kind of a situation, I think. So I mean, as much as I, might enjoy his, his career and think he was, be surprised basically at his statistics, some of his statistics, I don't think he cuts it. I just don't.
To me, he's a clear no.
Yeah.
He's an example of somebody who had a long career, a steady career. I even think he was considered the ace of the Cubs staff during the 70s.
Probably, yeah.
And having grown up in Michigan, watching a lot of WGN Cubs games,
Yeah.
used to frustrate me that my Expos lost to Rick Reuschel a lot. He didn't throw particularly hard. He just was a very steady, crafty pitcher.
Right.
But again, it's like Hall is very good. He has 3 All-Star appearances, but you have to remember that the Cubs were horrible during the time he played.
You have to pick. Every team has to have one, right? So that was probably.
I would imagine when he was on those teams, he might have been the only representative.
Right.
Right. And then he had 2 Gold Gloves, which is good, and 1 20-game season. But I think there's a lot of players like that. I would have to go back and look at it, but I would think that that's a very common. So it's surprising when you told me about this list. I was shocked, shocked that Rick Reuschel would be that high.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't look at his brother. His brother played too, Paul.
Yep.
I didn't look at his stats, so I don't know if they're anywhere close to the Necros. Probably not. But anyways, so that was kind of a fun little statistic there, or trivial note. Okay, so number 5 on the baseball reference list was with 67.9, and this guy did not show up in the top 5 for Fangraphs, I don't believe, and that was Graig Nettles, one of the favorites of Midlife Sports Cards, because that guy is also named Greg with that spelling. So he has some interesting statistics. 390 home runs. That's obviously a pretty big number. I mean, admittedly, there are some people above that number who are not in. I think like Dave Kingman is probably one of them, and there's a few others who, obviously performance-enhancing people too. But then you get to the batting average, which is also, I think, Kingman-esque in a 248 batting average. And then a 750 OPS, which is below both Grich and Whitaker, for someone who has 150 home runs more than them, both of them. He did have 1,300 plus RBIs and nearly 1,200 runs, and 11 20 home run seasons.
It's funny because he would be more valuable today than Whitaker and Grich because he hits home runs.
Right.
And he probably struck out a lot.
Yeah, I didn't look, but probably.
But that would be tolerated.
Yeah. The funny thing is, so he had six All-Stars appearances and 2 Gold Gloves, but never got a Silver Slugger. And so I don't know if when they had Silver Sluggers started, maybe in the late 70s, or I'm not sure, but that might be why, because he was kind of doing bigger numbers in the 70s.
My guess is that the reason he didn't have Silver Sluggers is because of George Brett.
Right.
George Brett probably won.
Brett and Schmidt were just cleaning up
all the time,
that decade. Yeah, exactly. So he's a tough one for me. I don't know. I'd say no, mainly because of the batting average. I just don't think you can put someone who has a 248 career batting average in the Hall of Fame. It just, for me, I'm sure there probably are some people who are in there who have that kind of batting average. I just can't think of it offhand who that might be, but for that instance alone, I just can't see it. I mean, I know he has World Series victories with the 70s Yankees, and I think he did late 70s Yankees. But yeah, it just never he doesn't grab me, I guess, as that kind of Hall of Fame guy.
Yeah, he's a no for me.
Yeah,
I think he also is prisoner to Brett and Schmidt, as we were thinking. Those are clearly the best 2 third basemen in the 30s and 80s, or 70s and 80s.
Right.
And Nettles is maybe third. There are probably others, if I looked on a list, that I would say, oh, no, he's not as good.
Well, Brooks Robinson was there for the first half of the 70s, but then he was end of his career, obviously. So
I was surprised to see that there is an all-star card of Graig Nettles. And then there's this AL active career home run leader at one point. He was on the top 3
with Greg Lazinski.
Yeah. Greg Lazinski and Reggie Jackson.
Yeah.
I mean, there are a few factors that I think keep him in the conversation. Mm-hmm. He was a captain for the Yankees after Thurman Munson died. And that's
a big deal.
A huge deal to people.
Right.
And he was, prominent member of those great late 70s, early 80s teams.
Yeah.
He has 6 All-Stars, which surprised me.
Yeah.
He has an ALCS MVP as well, 1 year. So I think to his benefit, they were on TV all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
There was no MLB TV back then,
Right,
right? And so the
right.
Yankees were on TV a lot.
Yeah.
The Red Sox were on TV a lot.
Sure.
And so I know his name. He actually, he ended his career with the Expos. So that's one of the reasons that I kind of like him.
Right.
He played a little bit at the last year of his career with the Expos.
Okay, yeah.
But I think it's an easy no, actually.
Yeah, because of the batting average, or just like
yeah, and
in
I think
comparison?
I think we need to come up with a new, the Mendoza line is 200. There should be a different line for 250, and maybe
Right.
that's the Graig Nettles line. It's like right at 250 is,
Right.
As a benchmark as a kid growing up, you would think that was a player that shouldn't be in the starting lineup anymore.
Right.
Yeah.
But admittedly, he has 21 defensive WAR over
Yeah.
his career, so that was part
Great-
of it.
great defensive player.
Admittedly. Okay, so one last guy who I just added because he was, while not in the baseball reference list, he was in Fangraphs, and he was actually number 2 in Fangraphs in the top 5 to Pete Rose, and so he had a 79.4 Fangraphs over his career, and that was Mr. Procedure himself, Tommy John. And so this guy had an amazingly long career.
I think he pitched till he was 46 or something
Yeah,
like that.
26-year career.
Yeah.
I think Nolan Ryan was 27 years or something like
Wow.
that. So that was like, they were right around the same, length of time. And so, again, maybe because he was around for so long, but he got 288 wins, which he has to be the guy who has the most wins who's not in the Hall of
Yeah,
Fame, I would
gotta be.
think. 3.34 ERA, very similar to Reuschel. Not comparing them, but actually his WHIP was higher than Reuschel's, 1.283. Interestingly, he had 3 20-win seasons, and those were in 4 years. In all those 4 years, I think when he got an All-Star games, but again, 4 All-Stars over 26 seasons.
Yeah.
And then he also had the 4 Cy Young voting seasons. Again, I think those were that 20-win seasons around there. And and so I personally, because again, this is one of those things where like, he's notable. I've heard of him.
Mm-hmm.
I know who this guy is. I understand his like value to the league, and maybe part of that is the fact that that had the procedure named after him,
Yeah.
and so that might be why.
If you think about players that played in the 70s,
Right.
I would guess that his name is uttered more than any other player in the 70s, because every time somebody has a
Right.
problem with their elbow,
Yeah.
they have Tommy John surgery.
Exactly.
Nobody else has that kind of
Right.
notoriety. Yeah.
Right. So again, because of that notoriety, because of his durability, and because of, obviously helped by that procedure, and because of the win totals, I just think he deserves to be in it. So I'm going with yes. It's a close one, but I think he does deserve to be in it.
Yeah. And if you compare him against Rick Reuschel, I think there's no doubt he
Yeah.
has a better resume. Just by wins. And I know that like nowadays wins are not as valued as much, but back
Right.
then it was.
Yeah.
That was the criteria.
Sure.
And if you take that 4 season stint where he won 20 games in 77, 79, and 80, and I
Right.
think he was pretty much the Dodgers ace
Yeah.
of those great teams. I know
Yeah.
Don Sutton was on that team, but he was, so to me, he's what I think of as a steady left-handed starter, 4-time All-Star. And because of the historical, he should be in the Hall of Fame anyways, even if he's not, if he's not in there with a plaque, he should be in a special section about what he
Right.
did and how he recreated his
Right.
career and how he's advanced so many people's careers because of what he did.
It's kind of like the Kurt Flood thing, like about
Yeah.
the free agency, and the fact that like people are so happy, so many people profited because of what Kurt Flood did.
Yeah, yeah. So Tommy John is probably also on the fence to me. Whitaker and him are on the fence, but if he got in, I'd be happy.
Yeah, yeah. That's and also I did a little thing writing down, since we're obviously talking about baseball cards here. I did some comparisons with. Again, this is really, really high rated PSA stuff. But so the Pete Rose, his 63 tops went for $717,000 for a PSA 10, which
this guy,
yeah,
this is only
not a PSA 10?
4. This is a PSA 4.
Okay. That was back in 2016. So one can only imagine how much it would be now. I'm guessing it would cross $1 million is my assumption. He had but his PSA 9 in 2022 was 106,000. So that year, 63, Willie Stargell had a rookie, and his rookie for a PSA 10 was $63,000, and that was back in 2021. So I imagine it would be a little more than that now. Maybe, who knows? And then Whitaker, 78 tops. His PSA 10 is $1,350 in September 2023. I know there's obviously Trammell and Molitor and Murray that year, but those guys are just kind of above and beyond. I think Whitaker. I compared him with Morris because I felt like that's a better comparison. And Morris's rookie actually is less than this. It's 1,033 PSA 10 in April 2024. And then Bobby Grich, I was surprised by this. 1971 tops. A PSA 9 for his was $2,222. And that was in December of 2020, which was, I think, before the real boom kind of happened. So I compared that to, like, Ted Simmons to me felt kind of like a similar comparison for that year. His rookie PSA 9 in May of 2021, so around the same period, was $4,400. So that was interesting. And then Rick Reuschel, 73 tops was his rookie, and PSA 9 in earlier this year, this past month or two, $250 around, somewhere in the neighborhood. I compared that to Rich Gossage, because the other rookie that year was Schmidt, and there's no way we're comparing Rick Reuschel to Mike Schmidt. And Gossage's rookie that year for PSA 9 was $510 in September of 2023. So only twice as much as Reuschel, interestingly enough. Nettles, his 69 tops was PSA 9 was $375 in December 2023. And I did not compare him with Reggie Jackson, but I did compare him with Raleigh Fingers because, close, I guess, ish. And Raleigh Fingers for a PSA 9 that year his rookie was $1,216 in October 2023 was when the last sale happened. And then Tommy John, 1964 tops, PSA 10 back in June of 2020, so a while ago, $3,180, which is a fair amount. Again, few PSA 10s of that year exist, I'm sure. Meanwhile, Phil Niekro, also a rookie that year, his PSA 10 sold back in May 2021, so within 6 months or about a year, I should say, of Tommy John's sale, $22,140. So a pretty substantial difference, like 7x, something like that. So, anyways, just kind of wanted to give that frame of reference for those years. I thought it was interesting. So. So we might, do this occasionally, just bring statistics in and talk about the Hall of Fame or whatever, because, it's just I think a fun conversation to have. And why not say whether or not someone, should be, who doesn't know who we are, should say whether they're in the Hall of Fame or not.
And if you know somebody else that you'd like to argue their case, their war, I would love to see a comment about who should be considered, who's not considered. We have obviously are younger. It's funny to say that. So it's like 70s on is what we think. Yeah. We
kind of have a sense for what their playing career was like. Right. So obviously, in the comments, if you'd like to put in your vote for the 6 people we discussed, or if you have any other thoughts, like Ken said, we'd love to see it. So thank you, everyone, and we'll see you next time.